Twatandikira okukodinga nga tetunanga kutandika. Naye message ebeera egireeta. Njagala kulaba pulezidenti bajjayo sookera mu tesiti. Good morning, Nicholas.
Good morning, Kisachi. How are you?
Good to see you.
Me too. How have you been?
I'm fine. Very happy to have you this morning. Let us start and we allow the students in then.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. CPA Esther Aliwaj Sache. I welcome you to today's Students Engagement Seminar. Our presenter is already in, so we are about to start. We're just waiting for a few people, but since we're already 69, we can go ahead and start. But before we go ahead, the program for today stands like this. We shall have 9 to 10:30 audit practice and assurance. Then mid-morning, we shall have MDC. And then in the afternoon, we shall have integration. So kindly inform all your friends and tell them about upcoming webinars. I'm the coordinator as well as the moderator of this session. So before us, we have CPA Nicholas Mushabenta. Nicholas is a Ugandan passionate accountant, married to one wife and 2 children, and he finds joy in doing charity, adventure, music, audit, and he loves IFRSs. Nicholas is an audit partner at BDO East Africa, Ugandan office. He has experience in audit for 10 years, but 6 of them were at Ernst & Young, and I think the remaining 4 were at BDO. He's a seasoned accountant, and he's a guru in international financial reporting standards. He's a highly experienced auditor with deep knowledge of international auditing standards and then other reported financial reporting guidelines. He's not only a highly qualified accountant, but he's a proud member of ICPAU. Nicholas holds a master's degree in business administration, and he has also had an impactful resource. He has been an impactful resource to the accounting profession. He has been recognized as the Accountant of the Year for the year 2022. He has served on various boards and committees of the Institute, and currently is the chairperson board of the CPA Circle Limited. He was the chairperson of the supervisory committee of the CPA Circle, and is a member of ICPAU Council's Professional Standards Committee, and is also a member of ICPAU Public Practice Panel. Furthermore, Nicholas has massive practical experience in auditing, accounting, academia, and business consultancy. He has been tutoring CPA and ACCA courses. He was lecturing at Chambogo University, and he has conducted a number of trainings, both local and international, and he always facilitates the IFRS workshop and ICPAU CPDs. And even he has been presenting on a students' engagement webinars. So before us, we have a very experienced person, and hopefully we are going to learn more from him. And let us try as much as we can to tap into his expertise. CPA Nicholas, you're welcome.
Thank you, Esther. Just confirm that my screen is visible and at the same time you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, and we can even see the screen.
Wonderful. Good morning to you, the future CPAs. I'm glad that I'm here to take you through paper 16, for which the contents that I would like to walk you through, there we go. The learning outcomes are in respect to the new CPA syllabus for paper 16. I will have an overview in terms of the syllabus coverage for this paper. We have to appreciate the assumed knowledge from the lower paper, which is paper 9, that feeds into paper 16. The approach to case study questions will have more insights given the nature of the structure of the paper. We have to appreciate the case study questions. In case you don't appreciate or you don't know how to approach a case study question that has the highest mark, then there are less chances that you can pass the paper if you don't concentrate on passing question 1. Thereafter, we'll have general tips in terms of how do you prepare for exams. Yes, you must be knowing how to prepare, but we're just trying to add on what you know. You never know, it can spice up your chances of passing not only this paper, but even other papers, given the fact that some of the tips cut across. Then lastly, we'll also have to walk through what are those issues or the messes that you must avoid, the pitfalls that you have to avoid if you're to actually not to regret what you did. You may not be in the know, but basically you need to appreciate what are the pitfalls that you have to avoid to ensure that you can pass the paper highly. So starting with the learning outcomes, the overall aim of paper 16 is basically to consolidate and exercise judgment in respect to the execution and then finalization of an audit and other assurance engagements, for which it should be evidencing how you understand the compliance with international standards on auditing and the regulatory framework. In terms of assessment, what is expected to come from this paper, which I'll be emphasizing on, that the difference between like this paper 16 and paper 9, that at this level, you expected to understand how to analyze, synthesize, evaluate based on the knowledge that you'll have acquired from the lower paper. Then in terms of exam structure, what you need to appreciate is that section 1 is a compulsory question, which has 50 marks. That is 50% of your entire paper. And then at the same time, you have section B, which actually has 3 questions, and you select one out of, you select 2 out of the 3 questions, for which each of the question earns you 25 marks. So to some extent, you may realize that this paper is more or less compulsory in terms of the question that are going to be set, because it means that it's only one question that you don't do. So that's why you need to pay attention in terms of what is expected. The specific learning outcomes, just presenting them on the screen. And understanding that there are different subtopics or the topics that are in this paper, for which there are different knowledge, the skills based on those learning outcomes of synthesizing, the analysis, the evaluation that you need to understand. So I will not go much into the details. The materials should be shared, or I believe, of course, you already have the syllabus. Let's focus much in terms of understanding the details of now how these different specific learning outcomes that they need to be appreciated. But maybe what I need to emphasize is that as you can see the different learning outcomes, you check the first row, the last columns have the insights in terms of each of the specific line item, what is it that at the end of the day you expect it to be tested on. For instance, number 1, which is about the advising on the regulatory, professional, and ethical issues that are relevant to the execution of the audits and other assurance engagements. It means that you're tested in terms of understanding what's the impact and the relevance of the regulatory framework for which audits and assurance engagements are conducted from. But if you check like number 4, you will see that we are saying apply information technology, IT, across the audit cycle. So it's in the first column of A, of which A represents application, AN represents analysis, S is synthesize, then E is evaluation. So also, as you're trying to get more insights or as you read your syllabus, the best way to understand the extent to which and how you're likely to be tested, this is the guidance that you need to be aware of. And this same guidance is part of the syllabus. Amongst the first pages of the syllabus, they will tell you the different topics that you have in the syllabus. What is the critical aspect that you expected to be tested on? For instance, like number 6, which is about relating, it's related to the group audits, as we are yet to have more insights, or you may be in the know that for group audits, the critical expectation is about the analysis of how the group audits, International Standards on Auditing 600, is actually appreciated. So this is what you have to take note of and appreciate exactly what you need to focus on for the different sub-elements. So if I'm to quickly go through the overview in terms of paper 16, remember the syllabus was changed effective 2023, though some of the topics were maintained as per the prior syllabus. The ones I'm highlighting red are the ones that were completely too new into the new syllabus. Of course, some other topics, there are a few areas that were added and also modified, but the critical ones, which I can say they were purely new and in before, they were not directly being highlighted anywhere. It's section G and then section L, which is risk management framework in organization and corporate governance. So going back to the first part of professional, legal, and regulatory environment, I think the best way I need to go to where I have a bit of the summary of the key areas that you expected to focus on. In terms of professional, legal, and regulatory environment, you why do we need to conduct the audit of the financial statements, the historical financial statements, given the fact that in practice, the financial statement audits encompass the greater portion of actually what auditors, or what would say under the audit practice and assurance, the main service that is actually offered is the audit of the financial statement. So it's much more important to understand exactly why is there a need for companies, for different institutions, that they have to conduct an audit of financial statements. You will have to appreciate what are the different regulations and the different regulators. Of course, without forgetting the usual suspect, especially our own institute, ICPAO, then International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board, which is in charge of issuing the international standards on auditing, which are the most critical standards that are used in audit. Of course, the overall body that is in charge of establishment of other relevant standards, including the International Financial Reporting Standards, IFA. Then there you'll need to appreciate what's the process that actually is undertaken for these standards that we are talking about, the ISAs, the ISKM 1, 2, that we are yet to quickly look through, what the standard setting process looks like. So you need to have a crew. The other key area that I picked is mainly about the audit failures and what is actually would be the causes or the effects of why there could be an audit failure. In terms of other subsection of Section A is the statutory audits, which are normally compared with the subsection 3 of what are the statutory audits, those that are required by law, and then those that are not mandatorily required by law, but are undertaken as audits for which the practitioners have the obligation or have the mandate to actually offer such services. Then also we have to appreciate in audit, one of other key elements that is considered most is understanding how the laws and regulations actually impact our audits of the financial statements. Similarly, under the first section is when we have to understand the objectives of conducting an audit of financial statements, and also on a high level, understand the methods or the concept of audit evidence, which is covered much under paper 9. So when it comes to paper 16, there are specific account balances which we focus on. But at the end of it, the way it's going to be asked, remember, the expectation on how you answer should be different from how you expect to be answering at paper 9 because of the different expectations in terms of learning outcomes. I will have more insight still on the learning outcomes when it comes to paper 9. What are those specific aspects that you have to take note of? In terms of audit planning and risk assessment as another section as part of paper 16, the objectives of an audit are mainly in terms of those that are conducted in accordance with ISAs. That's when you have to understand the agreeing the terms of engagement, basically coming up with an engagement letter. What is it that is needed to understand before and as you're trying to come up? An engagement letter or terms of an engagement for us in audit is what substitutes the general term of a contract. And it's critical in terms of especially minimizing the auditor's liability, for which it is expected that no any assignment should be conducted before a formal engagement letter is actually signed. So it becomes critical for us to appreciate what is it that is needed. In particular, you'll have also to understand now, given the fact that audit practice and assurance is mainly based on having, it's a professional service that has to be done with the highest quality standards. There are specific guidelines on understanding the quality management of an audit of the financial statements. That is ISA 220 revised, which has to be appreciated in details as part of Section B. It's on the same section that you'll have to appreciate who has the overall responsibility for managing and achieving quality on an engagement, who is always basically an engagement partner. For every engagement, partners have that responsibility of ensuring that the quality on an engagement is achieved. Then you'll appreciate the documentation in terms of the planning and risk assessment. That's a time also you'll have to appreciate the responsibility of an auditor in respect to fraud. As you may be in the know, auditors are yet to fully be, which it's highly unlikely to happen, that because of the nature of the fraud, the auditors are not 100% liable to the detection and prevention of fraud. But nonetheless, still to cover up and guarantee the public that even if it's not our responsibility to detect and prevent fraud, we have a specific responsibility, especially performing relevant procedures that are expected to help us appreciate if actually there could be fraud. And in case there are indicators or risk of fraud, or risk of material misstatements due to fraud or an error, then we are required to perform specific procedures that we can satisfy ourselves as to whether we have actually identified and prevented fraud. But otherwise, the responsibility still remains with the management, but then it's critical for the students and from the practice perspective to understand what's the responsibility of an auditor in respect to fraud. Maybe what I need to emphasize in my conversation and the presentation I'll be making, the nature of the paper is, remember, it's audit practice and assurance. For you to, for purposes of passing it, you need to appreciate that the nature of your answers, the understanding of what is expected from you as a student is more or less of somebody who is already in the field doing audit. And that's the key difference between paper 16 and paper 9. That paper 16 is mainly basically a practical paper. So in terms of explanation, the good thing I've already been introduced. Audit is my daily bread. It's what I do almost 20 hours a day. So I should be in position to hope you appreciate from a practical angle. So I'll still be using that same approach as I'm trying to explain. I will be dwelling much on what is it that auditors do on a daily basis, that for you as a student, as you're going to be revising, as you're attending classes, in case something is not clear from a practical angle, please task your tutors to help you understand from a practical perspective, what is that? So like that point of auditor's responsibility, it shouldn't be just a theory thing of saying, okay, who's responsible for fraud in terms of both management, either of the management or the auditor. So you have to understand the requirements under paper 16 from a practical angle, unlike on the side of paper 9, which is basically more of the comprehension and the knowledge aspect. So take note in terms of my clarifications and the remarks I'm going to be making, the explanation I'm going to be making. I'll be trying to come from an angle of practical perspective for which you need to have more insights. Of course, we only have 1.5 hour and a half. I cannot make it more practical to a greater extent and go into details of every subtopic. Otherwise, I'll still believe that the high-level insights I will give you from a practical angle should give you a basis for which that at the time you're revising, at the time you're attending classes, by the time you come for the exams, you need to be aware how you need to understand the expectations from the examiner, the expectation from the institute, that by the time you're finishing paper 16, what you should be knowing, and how can you pass to the extent that after you can be a resourceful person who can actually now become a practitioner. Because as you're aware, the moment you finish the course and you undergo the PET, you become a full member, you evidence to the institute, that to the council, that you have the relevant experience, then you're given a license to become a practitioner. And then what does it mean? It would imply that by then, what I'm talking about from a practical angle is now what you're supposed to be doing. So that's why right now, the expectation of paper 16, in case you might have heard that it's amongst the highly failed papers, it's just because of that. The institute cannot afford to release students who are going to come back and ask for licenses when in actual sense they don't understand the practical aspect of what audit is about. Because afterwards, they will be running some master classes, but that's not enough to the extent that it can help you understand if you didn't have the basic principles of what audit practice is all about. So take note of that for you to appreciate the explanations I'm going to be making. So in terms of subsection 7, planning of an audit of financial statements, you appreciate how do we identify and assess the risk of material misstatements. And when we talk about the risk of material misstatements, we are trying to understand to what extent are the financial statements that you're reviewing contain material errors for which you cannot issue an qualified opinion. Then, more importantly, materiality, how it's considered in planning and performance of an audit, is more critical. Then you also have to understand the auditor's responses to assess risks. As auditors, especially with one of the key standards that emphasizes the audit approach that it's risk-based is ISA 315, revised 2019, which is about the risk identification, for which that every audit we now focus on inherent risks, the significant risks, for which we believe are likely to result into a risk of material misstatements in the financial statements. So the moment we identify the risks in audit, that's now under audit planning and risk assessment. It does not make sense if you do not design the specific responses to address those risks. The reason I told you that from auditor's responsibility in respect to fraud, the moment you suspect there is a fraud within an organization, that now becomes an identified risk. You do not just perform general procedure that you've been doing for other clients. Now you sit down and come up with what you think are the appropriate responses, the tests, the procedures, that if you're to perform them, you'll actually identify and confirm whether actually there is a misstatement in the financial statements or not. Of course, if there's a misstatement in the financial statements, amongst of other topics we're here to cover, is that you evaluate the nature of the misstatements. If you can, you're in a position to adjust, to propose for adjustments, they are adjusted for, and you become happy. If they are not adjusted for, then you know the evaluation in terms of a conclusion that you're supposed to be making. Then last, in terms of audit planning, we have also to consider what are the factors and the circumstances and other requirements that we must do as auditors when we are auditing a client that is using what we call a service organization. A service organization is an independent organization or institution that is contracted by your client to offer them specific services that actually on behalf of management that they ought to be doing. More in particular, most of the outsourced services, normally the payroll, you find that organization decides and say, we no longer want to, because of the sensitivity of the process, let's outsource our payroll, and maybe also because of complexity from these tax regulations that require the payee, the LSTs, the NSSF. It'd be like, let's contract it to another party who is going to be helping us to be processing and making payments for that, for the payroll, for the staff cost. What matters is that those staff costs, the payroll, they will appear as part of the financial statements that you're auditing. So as auditors, we have to be aware what are the controls for the other entity that has been contracted to actually perform amongst of the management's responsibility that they ought to be doing. In case there are issues with the other entity, especially from the control perspective, they are ineffective controls, then it would imply that there are chances that the payroll costs that they are giving to management at the client that you're auditing might actually be misstated. So that's why we have to be careful with the other service organizations that offer a service to the client that you're auditing. So under that subsection, as you read, as you go through the syllabus or the notes, please take note of that. That's from that perspective for which you need to understand that. The next section is the audit testing and procedures. This is now, which is more related to the one of paper 9, but the most critical aspect is to understand that how it is examined, and then to some extent, not all account balances are covered and they cut across under paper 9. So the ones that are listed here, you can later go and check under paper 9, what are those specific account balances that are also listed there. There are a few that I can focus on, like the part E here, which is more advanced in terms of financial reporting. Financial assets or financial instruments. I should have even put financial instruments, but mainly financial assets. Not the basic ones, especially like the government bonds, the treasury bills, the shares, the nature of those account balances. They are appreciated to require a more understanding of the international financial reporting standards, IFRS accounting standards, which are at an advanced level than now the one at level 2, for which there you may focus on those revenue, cash and bank, even if the same balance is focused here. So they are, from my understanding, that most of the questions under paper 16, they are likely to be inclined to the complex account balances as compared to the account balances that would have been examined at paper 9. So why I'm saying that you see, like for part A, we have non-current assets and liabilities. And amongst of those, you have the different sub-elements. Then you have the current assets and current liabilities, which also will be cutting across. I've just generalized, but in the syllabus, they are specific, the inventory, the receivables, but then to a greater extent, receivables are cutting across paper 9 and paper 16, but they are also financial assets, but basic financial assets. You have the tax balances, the related party balances. So to a greater extent, that by level 3, you have already done much of the accounting related papers, the advanced financial reporting, almost you already be getting done with the course. Then there it means that you're in a position to understand the more complex account balances. And therefore, it's just my own suggestion that you mainly focus on the complex account balances when you're now at level 3. If there's anyone who is part of the call and you're for level 2, then also you need to understand that as you reading your level 2, it's much important to come and compare from the side of level 3, which are those balances that cut across, and then at the same time, get the solutions. Of course, get into the details of the syllabus, understand what would be the difference between, because like for PPE, the one I know is examined under both ends, and it has ever been examined. But the way it's going to be examined in terms of the question approach is expected to be different from the one of paper 9. So it's much more important to understand that even if it's same account balance that is cutting across, what would be the differences at the time of examination. But more importantly, before you come to those that are likely to cut across, why aren't you first starting with those that are more likely to be examined because of the nature of the paper at its level? Then you have specialized sectors. It's high time to emphasize under the new syllabus, we realized that the institute realized that there was a need to understand that in terms of audit, what normally complicates some of the engagements in audit practice are the specialized sectors. You come into the banking sector because of its unique terminologies and the nature of the business. If you've not done audits for like 3-4 clients or for 3-4 years, and you just come in for the first time, it becomes a challenge. So because of especially because of complexities of the nature of the business operations and the nature of how the regulations that are so tight within those respective sectors, it was found more important to actually focus on those specific sectors for students to appreciate that by the time you're finishing a CPA course, you're not disadvantaged that at the time of taking up a client who is in a telecommunication company, you're taking up an insurance company, you're taking up from a financial institution perspective, whether it's a bank or accredited institution, you shouldn't be having challenges because it's a complex sector. So the knowledge ought to have been gotten by the time you finish the course in terms of these specialized sectors. So the critical ones that we are focusing on You shouldn't be bothered about all sectors. The rest of the sectors are covered by default based on the nature of the topics. But the ones that are more specialized and customized are the banks and credit institutions, the telecommunication companies, and the insurance companies. Then in terms of group audits, I think if I'm to focus much on the syllabus, I think I may not cover so much for you, and the other areas also need to be given attention. You'll pardon me, I quickly walk through in terms of the syllabus so that we focus also much on the other key areas of the, as per the contents that I presented to you at the start of this session. So for group audits, those are the different sub-elements that you ought to be focusing on, which are purely aligned with the syllabus. You have to understand the scope. What is it that the auditor need to understand before they accept, or when they're accepting a group audit engagement? Maybe I'm going to be giving more insights in terms of some of these topics. Group audits, it's an assignment for which, as an auditor, you're auditing an entity that has subsidiaries or associates that actually expected to be consolidated. So it's basically when you're auditing a client that requires consolidation of the financial statements of the different subsidiaries. So they are mainly parent entities or holding companies that we refer, when we are auditing them, they become group audits. And in that instance, there are so many things that to be taken into consideration. And the reason it's a special and an independent topic in our syllabus. And the standard is also specific, ISA 600 revised, that gives you guidelines on what you need to take note. So issues of planning, the communication, as trying to come up with group instructions. Since now you're the group auditor, you have to rely on the work that is also done by the component auditors. The auditors of the subsidiaries, we call them component auditors. Then you who is auditing the parent entity or the holding company that you're consolidating, we call you as a group auditor. So you ought to be communicating how the component auditor is expected to be reporting to you. That's what we refer to communication and the content of the group audit instructions. What are the programs and audit procedures to be performed, the audit risks, the extent to which you need to rely on the work of the component auditors, what are their responsibilities. There are always issues of language, culture differences, and how they can actually be maneuvered. Is it necessary to conduct site visits if especially most of the group audits are, they are for different jurisdictions? You're here in Uganda, but you're auditing a group audit. Sorry, you're auditing a parent entity that has subsidiaries like in Rwanda, TZ, Kenya. At what extent that you need to actually go on ground and have a conversation with the group auditors, sorry, with the component auditors. What are the specific procedures that you need to put into consideration to effect a two-way communication? And then last on that, we have also an element of joint auditing, which is part of the group audit that you partner with another practitioner or with another firm to actually conduct an audit of a single client, and you're issuing an audit and a single audit opinion. So joint auditing is another interesting subtopic, which is not so common here in Uganda. And I'm looking forward for such, for which some of either small firms or big firms are taking on a single client, and for which it requires to have, or they are the ones saying that we are ready to serve you as 2-3 firms. We issue one opinion, even if we are independent audit firms. That is normally driven by regulations. For some Western countries where joint audits are done, you find that actually it's a regulation that requires, because of the complexity and the size of the entities, the regulation requires some of those entities to appoint more than one firm plus some other reasons as you're yet to go into the details of why could there be a need for joint auditing. Audit finalization as another section. This is now focusing on what is it that needs to be done towards the end of the audit, before and at the time of issuing an audit opinion. That's what you need to take note of, and that's what is being considered there. And the critical area that we focus on, the subsequent events, the going concern, evaluating the results of the audit work that has been done and the misstatements, the obtaining the letter of representation or written representations, and then wrap-up procedures. More in particular, which you need to take note and be careful that they are highly probable that they can be examined from a practical angle. We perform what we call a final analytical review. As you go through the remarks of the examiners, or as I'm yet also to emphasize, one of the key gaps that is being witnessed under this paper is that students are failing to apply racial or analytical procedures. Analytical procedures is one of the, especially for experienced auditors, one of the best procedure that is performed. And from the theory, from the examination perspective, you realize that the papers, they give you a set of financial statements, or just a single element or a few figures of the financial statements. And they're asking you either risks, they're asking you an opinion, whatever question that is being examined, that you can only answer it after you have applied what we call analytical reviews, or sometimes are in form of racial analysis, but sometimes just from a general perspective. Analytical reviews or procedures are simply the evaluation of plausible relationship between the financial information and non-financial information, identify if there could be any risk of misstatements in the financial information based on the other non-financial information that you're having. So we perform analytical reviews before or at the planning stage of an audit, during the audit, and at the same time, more importantly, at the end, at the finalization of an audit. The one at the start of the audit, we are trying to, based on our little knowledge that we'll be having after we have understood the entity and its environment and performed a few preliminary procedures, we are trying to set expectations of what we expect the likelihood of a misstatement in financial statements, or what is it that we expect the movement in the figures that are being presented to us. That from my understanding, I can say, I don't expect PPE to have moved beyond this percentage, because I've just had a discussion with the fleet manager. He has told me that there were no any acquisitions during the period. They did not dispose any item. So it is expected that in PPE, in the financial position, it's going to be the earlier net book value. Then you subject the depreciation, and then you get the net book value at the end of the current financial year. Mean that at least the minimum from expectation, I'm saying, I don't expect an increase in the PPE, because I'm using the information I've gathered in understanding of what happened in terms of the property, plant, and equipment from the fleet manager. And then I'd be like, what do I expect in terms of the financial position? If it's about revenue, we always do this. We get information, which you must be in the know. The knowledge you got at level 2 under paper 9, which is still partly covered in this paper under that planning and risk assessment, is that you'll have already understood, like for instance, from a revenue perspective, either you start with a marketing manager or with MD or somebody within an organization, and actually walked you through in understanding how are the operations during the year from the sales and the operations perspective. And you got to know that actually during the year, somebody told you we doubled the sales, and then they tell you, even if to summarize and to make it simple, you just had a statement. The marketing manager said, during the current year that you're auditing, we doubled the sales. Now that one tells you that your P&L, the top line, you expect minimum more than 50% of the increase in the revenue. Mean that your prior revenue, you double it, or at least minimum by 50%, that should be an increase you expect in revenue. What if you go to the P&L, you find that the same revenue has remained the same prior year, is the same as the current year, or instead it has reduced. That's a figure that have been presented to you by the CFO or by the finance manager. And he's not aware that actually you got some insights from the marketing manager whose operations drive his revenue that he is reporting in the financial statement. So you come and ask the CFO. I've been told, and even there you can even get statistics. You tell them, whoever you've been discussing with, give me the statistics. If like it's from a production perspective, give me the units sold for the current year and for prior. So that by the time you go to the CFO, you just show him facts. These are the statistics I've got. The current year, in fact, there was 60% increase in the units that were sold. And there was no any reduction in selling price. There are other factors remain constant. Why is your revenue reducing? Trust me, you'll have no any answer unless otherwise. If it was an intentional misstatement, then you would have no choice than telling you the truth. If it was an intentional misstatement, he'll go and investigate. You realize that actually either his system or somewhere, there was a problem for which some of the invoices were not captured. And he's like, whoa, that's a good one. I didn't realize that my revenue actually is misstated. Then you quantify what's the level of misstatements. They do the investigations, get to be sure of what needs to be done. So that's at a planning stage. Then at a finalization stage, you have done the audit. Everything you finished because it's done towards the end of the audit. You now do the comparison or whatever nature of the analysis you want to do. The most critical analysis that we do in audit is normally the comparison between the current year and the prior year. And then the reasonableness of the financial statements or the classes of transactions or the disclosures. So I will not still take you back to the theory aspect of analytical procedures, but I'm giving you the most critical analysis that we normally do. It's the comparison with the trend analysis for which you're trying to understand, based on my audit evidence I got, these are the figures I'm going to issue an opinion on, but I'm like, okay, for these receivables, this is not what I audited. I remember we made so much of the provisions, but how comes now in terms of the receivables, they have significantly increased, yet we made much of the provisions for the current year's receivables. So that one now gives you an insight that actually either the financial statements, which are normally in Excel, have been manipulated. Then you go back and investigate. If there is a misstatement, you correct it. So the final analytical reviews are done from an informed point of view, where you know what you expect. Is it aligned with what you're seeing as the final set or close to the final set of the financial statements that you intend to issue an opinion on? Highlights memo, giving some facts in terms of the results of the audit that has been done. That's what I can say from a finalization angle. So take note and appreciate at the time of revision, at the time of going through the lectures, focus much on the key areas that I'm referring to, which are 100% aligned with the syllabus that should be before you. In terms of reporting, now that's in particular the issuing of an independent audit opinion, if it's a financial statement audit, if it's any other assurance, engagement, then issuing a relevant report according to the specific standards that you'll have based on. So there we need to understand to what extent we need to rely on the work of specialists like the valuers, the legal experts, the engineers. Then you need to understand what is it that we need to communicate those charged with governance, who are mainly the directors of an organization. And the most critical communication there we normally do are the board presentations and the significant deficiencies for which we have identified in due course of the audit, but get the details from there in terms of the detailed syllabus or the notes that you have before you. Then the more in particular, given the fact that it's about reporting, you need to understand the different types of opinion. This is from the examination point of view that normally gives a challenge to students up to now, which I also understand. When I was a student, when I joined audit, the theory is a little bit so different from the practice. The practice is actually has to be appreciated, and that's why I give thanks to the institute that they had to revise the syllabus, and in terms of the content of paper 16, even the notes, how they have been produced or brought to you, is for you to actually understand somehow, to some extent, that as you're trying to read, as you're trying to understand, even from the examination point of view, the real audit, what do auditors actually do? So even if it's still it's still a challenge as to how students are struggling to understand what type of opinion can be given under the different circumstances. Even when you studied so much the details of the theory aspect under level 2, currently paper 9, where it's everything about theory in respect to the reporting. Even some extent, by I've seen from examination point of view, somewhere, because also it's now like assurance, they tend to align it to be more of what is expected from a practical point of view. But still, students are yet to understand and go into the details of understanding how is the audit opinion determined and what are the circumstances to rely on from a practical angle to come up with an appropriate audit opinion. And why it is important, like I said, you'll have whatever training you'll go through after you finish the CPA course will be more important for you to clearly give an appropriate opinion, since you will be having rights to obtain a license. In case you don't understand it now, when do we issue an qualified opinion, whether with an emphasis of matter paragraph or not? When do we give a qualified with except for? When do we give an adverse opinion? When do we give a disclaimer of opinion? More importantly, factoring in an element of materiality, it becomes a problem. How about other audits that we do that are specialized in accordance with the relevant standards? The communicating and reporting on the key audit matters that in Uganda currently for us within our jurisdiction, the key audit matters are required for the listed entities, in particular public interest entities. The definition can be still got from the ICPAO guidelines, but auditors are expected that every time you're reporting on a public interest entity, you expect to issue a key audit matter as part of your audit report. Then other matters and emphasis of matter paragraph, which is some other key areas to understand when it comes to audit reporting. Risk management framework in organizations. This is now the other new, complete new topic that was introduced in paper 16, and it has to be understood from the side of management or a client that you're auditing. That's the emphasis I need to give, because when you see risk management, we've been talking about risk planning and risk assessment. That's done by the auditor. So this topic of risk management framework in organization is that still as auditors, especially for this other non-assurance engagement we do, we can act as internal auditors of outsourced internal auditors of an organization. We are also still required to advise on how like an institution can come up with an appropriate and effective risk management framework. So if in case we don't understand, at the same time, not only from the practical point of view, the CPA course does not train only people who are going to become auditors. You're the same people who are going to become finance managers and CFOs. How are you going to add value, create value for an organization that you're employed for, if you do not understand from an organizational point of view the risk management framework? So that's understood from the side of a client, but not the auditors from the audit firm perspective. And those are the different topics, the subtopics that you need to take note of as you read your syllabus. Internal audit, I think this one shouldn't say anything much. It has always been there. Those are the different sub areas, though it was a little bit structured. A few sections were removed and then other new sections were introduced. So you need to take note of the sub elements of to focus on as you read and prepare for your exams. Forensic audits and investigations, also nothing much that changed, and the sub element should be straightforward, and that's what you should look up to. Management of an audit firm. Now, this is also, it didn't change so much, except that like for subsection 4, the elements, by the time the new standard, the new syllabus was being revised, is also when a new standard was, basically there was an amendment in the standard from ISQC 1 to ISQM 1. International Standards on Quality Control 1, it was changed to International Standards on Quality Management 1, for which there were some new elements that were brought on board. So virtually, there are a bit of some key amendments in the quality management procedures. Now we have 8 elements of quality management for the system of the quality management for the firm, which you need to take note. Even the element of marketing professional services in a prior syllabus, it wasn't so much emphasized, but now it's critical that you need to appreciate exactly how do auditors obtain work, what they need to appreciate in terms of marketing professional services. Other assurance and non-assurance engagements, which also cut across under paper 9, but appreciating to what extent you need to understand. Now, like for this one, it's more from a practical angle, like that subsection 2 where I see common review engagements, and we are saying review engagements of historical financial statements, review engagements for interim financial statements, review and reporting on prospective financial information. Their side to be asked for purposes of knowledge and application, but then here is on evaluating the impact, the sensitization that you need to understand, more especially with the examples, like subsections 3, where you see common non-assurance engagements. The common one is normally agreed upon procedure engagement. So there it's possible that at level 3, you're going to be asked to come up with a sketchy reporting form or a report for an agreed upon procedure engagement. Unlike under paper 9, rarely that you'll be asked to actually come up with a sketch or a format of an agreed upon reporting, an agreed upon procedure engagement. Like the another section that is normally there, which we just discussed, like the issue of accept the procedures to be performed before you accept an engagement. Under level 2, there you're likely to be asked for the factors. Even at level 3, they will be asked, but then some extent from a practical angle, level 3, they should be asked you practically. If one of the theory points under level 2 is like communicating with predecessor auditor, for level 3, under this paper, we should ask you, can you come up with a sketch of a letter that when an auditor is taking up a client who is a continuing client and has been audited by another auditor, come up with a letter that you believe is more is applicable, that if you wrote it to the predecessor auditor, he would understand and confirm to you for purposes of professional clearance. So it's basically that under level 3, in everything you do, focus much on examples and from a practical point of view than just knowing it theoretically. Otherwise, that's what you need to be knowing under the other assurance and assurance engagements. Then the other new topics that was introduced there, the corporate governance, for which those are the different topics. This was also earlier being covered under level 2, but it was not in level 3 before, but it still cuts across. So you need to understand the sections that are covered here for level 3, how different they are from those that are at level 2. Emerging issues, they also cut across for some of them, like money laundering and terrorism financing. On the other side of paper 9, you have it as part of ethics as a topic in its own, and then here you have it as an emerging issue. But then if it comes to general acceptable auditing standards, the fact that under level 2, we have public sector auditing. Now here, what would be more in common is subsection 4, where we go into the details of understanding international standards of supreme audit institutions, ESIs, which are normally performed for public sector audits. And therefore, you need to align and appreciate what is for level 2 and what is for level 3. That's the key or high-level overview I can say in respect to the syllabus for paper 16. You allow me now, I quickly walk you through, which I've already confirmed, but I can recap on it. For paper 9, the lower paper, as remember the other symbols I talked about, we have on the side, we had analysis, the application, analysis, synthesize, and then evaluation or evaluate. But then in terms of the lower paper 9, we focus much on knowledge, application, comprehension, and analysis. So here you see, you don't see the evaluation and you don't see the sensitization of the knowledge that you have acquired for purposes of applying the knowledge onto the audits and assurance or non-assurance engagements. In terms of having a clue on how and what you need to know, how to approach a case study question, I will focus on question 1, which is basically the case study that we have. And the reminder is that the structure of the paper, question 1 compulsory, carrying 50 marks, and it is always a case study question. And that's why I think it deserved to be focused on and understand what you need to know. I just focused on, of course, that the new standard came in effective June. For the first time, it was being examined. So I'm picking a few questions from June setting, where I'm not picking the entire paper. I'm just picking, let me go straight to the requirements. Then I try to talk about it in terms of what you need to know. How do we approach, how do we answer a case study question? Before I read the requirements, I'll first make the general remarks on how to approach a case study question, which is also aligned with some of the comments that have always been made in the examiner's remarks, which I need to remind you that please ensure you always go through the examiner's remarks. The starting point is you ought to read a case study minimally more than once, meaning that at least it should be twice. A case study question. Why? Sometimes you find that paragraph number 10 gives more insights on what you need to understand the requirements or the reason why paragraph 2 has been put into why it was actually included in the case study. So meaning that if you're just answering, you read the first paragraph, you read the second paragraph, and you want to start answering. You forget that there is paragraph number 10, which actually nullifies or changes the way how the message in paragraph 2 needs to actually be understood. So that's why you need to first read the question at the start, the entire case study, have a clue based on the case study. Then afterwards, read the requirements, the questions that are given at the end of the case study. After you've read the question, you read all of them. Also, don't just read the first part of like part A and you stop there. Similarly, with the explanation I've given, you find that actually part A, if you're not careful, you may mistaken it with the answer that are required like for part D. So that's why you need to read also all the questions that are asked on that case study. Then you go back, having read through all the requirements, you go back to read and be like, where did I find some of the requirements in this case study? So you go, at that time, it's okay, you can be highlighting. Of course, you know you're not allowed to write on the paper. So there in your, if you have a rough work, it's why you can start now taking note of the key points based on the question that you have read. Then after you've gone through, then you now come to part A, you reread it, the part A requirement, and then you go back to the case study, you pick the points. At that stage, you have known that the points you're picking for part A are not going to later realize, you're not going to later realize that actually the points I'm picking are supposed to be for point D or point C, because you have already read through 2 times, and now you have now reread the requirement. It's more critical, so the requirement is critical. Like you see for part A here, they're asking, that was a company or the entity that we are auditing to guide the board of governors on the matters of risk management and improving the control environment. So here you need to reread it. At first, you may actually have misquoted, which is normally a common practice, that when you're reading part A, you thought like there are risks for material misstatements. And then as you go there, you want to start by quoting credit risk, foreign exchange risk, overstatement of revenue. That's why at the time of answering, you reread and you be critical and take your time in rereading the requirement. It's when you realize that you start now highlighting the actual key concepts in the requirement and then get to know that, oh, this question requires business risks, meaning that that's now when we talk about comprehension at level, they're using the knowledge of on the lower paper, where you ought to have understood the knowledge of understanding there's a difference between business risks, inherent risks, and financial statement audit risks. So there now you have known that, oh, they want business risks. So in your mind, you need to be knowing what's the difference between the 2 or the 3, because in most cases, examiners ask these specific questions, or they include concepts in a question because they know that if you're not the person who has got a deep understanding of the topic, you're going to misfire and start misquoting a question that requires business risks, and you start mentioning inherent risks or financial statement audit risks. So that's why it's more critical. You come back and reread the requirement, and then you go back and pick the points. As you're picking the points, make sure that you support every point. Some questions, they may require general knowledge, but there are those where they are telling you as per the case study. So if it's as per the case study, then it means that you're supposed now to, for every point you give, reference to the section of the case study that you're actually picking your point from, and then confirm that you're understanding this and the reason why you're giving this point. So it's more critical that you relate the points you're giving to the case study. Then the other aspect, you need sometimes to understand that, yes, once in a while, not all questions actually, the requirements, they will try to base on the insights of the case study, but then part of it, you find that you need to apply the knowledge of the syllabus of the topic, regardless of the case study they have given you. And I think I will use an example on part E here. If you check part E, it is saying, discuss the circumstances under which DT and partners in their independent auditor's report may use, and no, this is a different question. Let me, sorry. Yes, I want to use that explanation on, this was November 2023. Still part D. I want you to appreciate, when do you apply a case study? When do you realize that actually the points that are needed are not directly coming from the case study, but we are using the case study come up with that specific question. The part D says, advise your engagement partner on the matters that should be included in years should be now the independent auditor, the auditor's report, under the emphasis of matter paragraph. Then Roman 2 says, circumstances where it may be necessary to include in the auditor's report an emphasis of matter paragraph. Members, you can first reread that so that you later appreciate why and why am I emphasizing trying to analyze, interpret, and appreciate whether to a greater extent the answers are in the case study, or some extent the answers are not in the case study, but requires the understanding of the topic. And if we are to go by the, I think I should pick also the examiner's remarks, you realize that one of the two was misquoted, and then most of the students could not even earn a single mark on one of them. Why? They could not clearly differentiate actually whether the points are in the case study or whether they should not actually be in the case study. So like for Roman 1, matters that should be included in independent auditor's report under the emphasis of matter paragraph, they have already told you what you should consider if you're to develop an audit opinion for the client you're auditing. So it means that you need to check the case study and look through based on your knowledge that you have acquired from lower paper. For instance, like we normally say, from lower paper, the matters that are considered for when we are giving an emphasis of matter paragraph, theoretically, we talk about issues of going concern. That I'm speaking from a theoretical point of view. We talk about issues if there are any significant cases that are involving the client is involved in, if there are any uncertainties that are likely to significantly impact the company, if there are inconsistencies in the other information. So you have the theory part. Now here they are telling you which matters to be considered in the auditor's report. Trust me, using that understanding, when you read the case study, because we don't have time, you'll actually realize that if I'm to remember the case study, it had issues of the cases, and now mean that from even the way they were defined, you would realize that you see that they are significant and they would impact the company in case the decision is later taken in favor of the other party. I don't remember if they are going concern issues, but you can talk about uncertainties. So you use the theory. Now you go to now like in this part, Roman 1, you cannot use general knowledge, impossible. When you're answering, you must go to the case study, pick those paragraphs. You refer to the paragraphs, but using that knowledge of what is it that is expected under emphasis of matter. So because like I know, issue of significant uncertainties are considered. And I've read this paragraph is saying, oh, the company is not sure of this and this and this and this. Then I say the independent auditor would need to consider this. Because of the liquidity issues, then there are chances that the company is facing going concern, and therefore this would be included as an emphasis of matter paragraph. So that one is picked directly from the case study. Then for Roman 2, they are saying circumstances where it may be necessary to include in the auditor's report an emphasis of matter paragraph. I reread. Circumstances where it may be necessary to include in the auditor's report an emphasis of matter paragraph. So this one, you realize that it's more or less the same as Roman 1, but they want you now to advise using your understanding, the knowledge you acquired from paper 9 and the same paper 16, from your understanding of the international standards on auditing the applicable standard, what is it that is supposed to be considered? And now you realize that from the examiner's remarks, he was confirming that students could not differentiate these different questions. And therefore, it's more critical to understand the requirements. So that's why you have to reread and reread both the case studies and the requirements. That's what I can say. Because of time purposes, I will still move to the second last part so that we wrap up. General tips. Some of these are, as I was explaining and giving more insights, they have already been covered. Excuse me. But I will still walk you through and I'll be quick because of time. And some of these seem to be simple, so that's why I don't need to explain anything much. Even though you think it's a simple point, it's like as if you have ever heard about it. These are critical things that you need to appreciate. It can actually make sense. It can rescue you from moving from 48 to 50%. So don't just take them for granted. When it comes to passing exams, everything must be considered. Don't take things for granted. Prepare so much and be ready for the audit paper, especially from the practical point of view. Like we've gone through the entire syllabus, do it on your own, go into the details, not just on a high level. Are you appreciating the failure or pass rates of the same paper that you're going to take? Because it gives you more insights on the extent of the efforts you need to put in. Obtain the right reading materials. What type of reading materials do you have? If in case you do not have an ICPAO study kit and you're using your tutor's notes that he has given you, first at least look for somebody who has the study kit, which is not supposed to be that yourself, you ought to be having one. Compare and be sure that your tutor's notes are aligned with the ICPAO's study kit, and at the same time are fully aligned with the syllabus. If yes, then there you're on the right track. But if there are some bit of inconsistencies, the ICPAO's examiner set based on mainly two things: the syllabus and the study kit of the institute. That is it. The rest, of course, will be from, they may not be detailed in the study kit, but they are highlighting the reference of the standard. Then at that stage, it means that the examiner is free to go to the standard itself and pick some more basis or the insights for which he's going to examine you on. But at the end of it, everything is 100% as per the syllabus and the study kit. That's what I'm talking about. The reading, right materials is more important. What's your strength and the weaknesses, so that you, based on that, understand what you need to read. Consider external factors. Sometimes if you're not careful to understand your nature of work, so that you plan accordingly to the extent that you don't later be affected by the family, the work, it is critical. Determine whether you need to go to class or not is important. Always appreciate the structure of the exam, like they have told you for this paper. So question 1, compulsory 50 marks. What does it mean? And then you need to know, this question 1, to what extent does it cover the entire syllabus? I can tell you, to a greater extent, almost the syllabus is covered. So if you fail question 1, what are the chances that you're going to pass the other questions? And like I've also still told you, 3 questions from section B, you choose 2. Mean that you only don't do 1. So for me, simply, I would say we are ICPAO sets entire syllabus of paper 16. And therefore, there's nothing like spotting a certain topic and you leave out another. You'd be likely to be doomed if you do spotting or you leave out some specific topics. Revise and practice as much as you can. Know when and when to revise. I mean, you're so tired and you're trying to read. That may not be appropriate time. But I can be tired at the same time I read. Do you know why? When I'm tired, is when I go just and trying to peruse through the syllabus, the time I'm trying to cross-check the examiner's remarks, the time I'm trying to understand out of corporate governance topic, what are the key sections that have always been examined most? That is also reading. And that's the time you can do that analysis. Don't wake up early in the morning at 6. And that's when you're doing that analysis. You want to know the last sitting, how many failed, how many passed. No, that would not be so smart for you. That's what I mean with knowing when and how to read smartly. Get the right people to discuss with, or is avoid anything that would like it to be disorganize your mind, and always from now and onwards, consider the examiner's remarks and recommendations. Lastly, what are the pitfalls? Still in line with what I've so far and what I've been hinting on. They are more connected for some of them. Others may be so new. But I'm saying most of the students, and you can testify if you read the examiner's remarks, they are unable to build. Sorry, I used here paper 12, but that was previously. Now it's paper 9, but paper 13 also, the advanced financial reporting, and then the audit ethics and assurance, knowledge to actually understand what needs to be done for paper 16. More importantly, number 2 there, can we focus on getting more insights, knowledge, rehearse our IFRSs, and always focus on the new standards. When I talk about IFRSs, you can never be an auditor because the most common financial reporting framework we have globally and here in Uganda is the financial reporting standards, IFRSs. Currently now is termed as IFRS accounting standards. There's no way you expect to audit financial statements that have been prepared in accordance with IFRS accounting standards when you don't know what they are. And where sometimes examiners normally trick and students fail is when they refer and they want you to first interpret the requirement of the IFRS, the accounting standard, and then later you understand what procedures to apply. So please, that's why from a career guidance perspective, no one should be doing this paper before you finish the other papers of the advanced financial reporting and advanced public financial management. The ones that are anything that relates to accounting. First, understand accounting. That's when you can know how to audit. Because audits we do, like I've said, 90% of most of assignments auditors do are financial statement audits. Then practical knowledge gaps, which I may not blame students, but try as much as possible as you revise, as you attend classes, focus from a practical angle. If you're reading a subtopic of materiality, don't read the theory like the way we are reading when you are doing paper 9. No, this time, their time it was a concept. The materiality, when information, if it's omitted or misstated, it's obscured, can economically influence the primary users of financial statements. It's no longer that way. But you remember also you have to first understand the theory part of it. So at level 3, we know that you know that concept. But now do you know how it is applied? And to a greater extent, most of the opinions that are given, for you to determine an opinion, you need to know how materiality affects the financial statements opinion. For instance, I can remind you, in summary, if the misstatements in the financial statements is material, that's by default a qualified with except for, whether it's because of a disagreement with management or whether it's because of limitation on scope. But if the misstatement is because of limitation on scope, is both material and pervasive, then that's a disclaimer. Then if the misstatement is both material and pervasive and relates to the misstatements in the financial statements, that's now an adverse opinion. So what does it mean? How is it normally applied? The case that they will give you, you're supposed to come up, most especially you quantify, and they would have given you figures that inventory has been misstated by like 1 billion. Now they're asking which opinion to be given. What does it mean? If the misstatement in inventory is 1 billion, you need to know what's my performance materiality and what's my planning overall materiality. In case overall materiality, or from sometimes there's some other quantitative factors, of course, but most especially, we look at the overall materiality if we look at overall financial statement level. If the 1 billion is already over and above the overall materiality of the financial statements, and it affects other elements of the financial statements as a misstatement in inventory. It affects cost of sales. It affects the expenses. It affects partly in terms of what should have been provided for as liability. Then that would imply that it's already pervasive to the financial statement level, and therefore that becomes an adverse opinion. So that's what I can say on a high level, knowing practically how to apply materiality, not just knowing that when information is omitted or obscured, that is theory, but now want to see how do you evaluate the impact of if that information is actually obscured or omitted or misstated. The other key simple things which still is critical, relating assertions, relating procedure to assertions is critical. You just explain a procedure, but you're not confirming what type of objective that you're trying to achieve, which is mainly based on the audit assertions. Students, you give as very few points as possible, yet you're required to give as many points as possible. The more points you give, the better that you have a chance that the examiner can easily actually trying to find a way how to compromise and give you some marks. But you have only given 1 point. Even that 1 point is wrong. Then how can you score some good marks? So members, try to make sure that you give as many points as possible. Then lastly, limited knowledge on article review. I've already emphasized that. Poor question analysis and selection. I've given you tips on that. Not customizing answers to the scenario. I've already told you that. Don't repeat or duplicate points. Be careful of that. Poor question and answering approach. Take note of that. Then the other element of either because of time or because you don't know, you did not prepare well, and in some topics you did not read them, and therefore, like question 3, you cannot know, and the rest, 2 questions, you don't know them, mean that by default, one of the questions may not be answered. That becomes disastrous. Fail to number your questions. You may think it's simple, a simple thing, but it gives some bit of confusion to the examiner. He's trying to understand which question is this, which question is this. And at the end of it, he may even feel demoralized that he would have wanted also to pity you and give you some marks somewhere. But you're demoralizing somebody who's struggling to know which section and which question you're actually answering. So at the end of it, you lose the chances of actually being compromised on for you to be given points. The one I can emphasize, they will never fail to mark your answers, but trust me, that confusion alone, it may even end up making somebody get confused and think that the answers you're giving for a different question, he marked you wrong. There is not actually mistaken, he's not doing it intentionally because you was confusing him or her. So the better you number all the questions and sections you're doing. Lastly, always make sure that you attain a professional mark. What do I mean? If they say make a report, that's the knowledge you have gotten from paper 9, come up with the format of the report. If it's a memo, you know what it is. If it's a letter, do a clear format of a letter. It's normally given some professional mark, 2 marks there, 1 mark, which is more or less like free of charge. And there you should be in position to satisfy yourself and pass the paper. That's what I can say. Sorry, I had so much, but the time was not on my side. And moderator, I believe we can go to the Q&A for a few minutes. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, CPA Nicholas. That was a very good presentation. I think we have like 8 questions that you can be able to view them on your side.
Yes, so I can go straight.
Yes, go straight to answering the questions.
Okay, thank you. I'm redoing this paper for the first time, but I don't know where exactly I go wrong. It's a hard question. She's asking he or she, it's the first time, but she's not sure where he or she could be going wrong. My response would be, it may be because of those the pitfalls I've talked about. In one way or another, trust me, the greater extent it will contribute to someone's failure of the paper. And then still the other general insights I gave that because I've told you the paper 16 is expected to be approached from a practical angle. My friend, can you mute? It's expected to be approached from a practical angle, but you realize that maybe the answers that you're giving, you're still paraphrasing them like as if you're doing paper 9. Even there, not only from the answer perspective, you realize that you reach there and yes, you think you understand things, but you at the time when you are preparing, you had not, you actually hadn't realized that you need to appreciate from a practical angle than just knowing a theory aspect. So know that level 3 for this paper, we are talking about analysis, less of application. There are only like 2-3 subsections where we do application, but the rest is analysis, synthesization, and evaluation. Those are the most critical expectation outcomes from this paper, and that's what it means that the setting and the answering is supposed to be from that angle. So as you read, my dear, the best way advice I can give you, get the study kit, pick the solutions, the past papers, especially these ones which align with the new syllabus, plus the model paper. Don't forget the model paper because it's also aligned with the new syllabus. Check the marking guide, the solution. Try to understand how is the examiner answering these different questions that I've read, because it means that by the time you're doing it for the first time, you already know almost everything about the syllabus. But from the tips I've given, if in the meantime, some section of the syllabus you don't know them, then it means that it's already a self-inflicted issue. But if you know everything about the syllabus, then it becomes easier that you get a past paper, you read, then you be like, I answered it this way. But then you come to the side of the answer of the solution. You trust me, you'll get to know why the examiner is answering it like this, and you realize that for you, you answered it from a different angle. Then after, pick the examiner's remarks. Trust me, there are chances that amongst of the areas that he's saying why the students failed, you might have been amongst of those because of that specific reason. And in the same remarks, we are happy the institute to go ahead and give recommendations on what is need to be done. Focus on the recommendation of what they have said, like which are in line with what I've just hinted on. With that one, you should be in position to pass the paper. Then the next one is saying, my concern is, why do examiners over-twist questions? Question interpretation is the biggest challenge here, especially given the long paragraphs. What solution can you have for us? These are hard questions, but the bit of over-twisting the question by the examiner can only be rectified by a comprehensive understanding of the syllabus, doing so much of your reading, like I've said, all the past papers, especially the recent, like past 5 sittings, you've gone through all the solutions, you've gone through the marking guides, you've listened to the different webinars that have been arranged by the Institute. If you have a detailed understanding, and then you support it by focusing on what is the expectation from the answering approach, which I've said that is from a practical angle. There's no way. Even if the examiner twists that question, like the one I hinted on, they are similar. So if you don't have a clear understanding from a theory perspective, because part 2 required theory, part 1, it was practical, but still you cannot answer it. You can't go to the case study. You pick the points when you don't know the matters of emphasis of matter paragraph. You can never even, you see a point that it's going concern as one of the paragraph, or it's a little bit tricked from the liquidity perspective, like I've said, but they're already giving insight that that's a going concern issue. Because you don't have the knowledge that going concern is one of the considerations when we are trying to determine when do we give an emphasis of matter paragraph. You'll never know that's the point that is there. So to a greater extent, Agnes, I can confirm the over twisting of the question, which I don't know whether it's over twisting, you can overcome it if you do a comprehensive preparation, revision, and understanding of what is required for paper 16. Billy, you're saying, kindly walk us through how to respond to odd risk questions. What are the minimum requirements that should be in that paragraph? Odd risk question, I hope you mean with odd risks, because one of the challenges that is normally with the risks is that confusions of students not differentiating between the different classes of all types of the risks. The business risks, the financial statement risks, or what I would call odd risks, and sometimes you may call them inherent risks, which are still more related to the financial statement odd risks. So when you say, what are the minimum requirements there? It's a little bit tricky. It's basically understanding the nature of the risks that are required. If it's the financial statement risks, maybe the minimum there I can give is that the examiner wants to see, is there any issue with the financial statements? Because an odd risk, and I think that's what you might be referring to, can only become an odd risk if it's linked to the financial statement. When you say overstatement of revenue, you're already indicating that one of the elements of financial statement called revenue is misstated. Understatement of fictitious expenses, you're already confirming that one of the elements of financial statements has issues. Under provisioning of bad debts, you're already confirming that receivables is going to be misstated because of under provisioning of receivables. You're saying credit risk, which also means that actually somebody's overstating receivables when actually says those receivables are no longer recoverable. You're talking about foreign exchange risk, that actually the foreign currency denominated account balances, which are in dollars, but somebody is reporting in Uganda shillings, he must have forgotten to retranslate at report date using a closing rate. He left them there as a normal UGX equivalent, yet from IS-21, they require all the monetary account balances at report date to now to be retranslated using a closing or a balance sheet date. So there you're still referring to financial statements. So what am I saying? The minimum requirements for odd risk, you must link it to financial statements. How do I differentiate it with like a business risk? Like one of the questions, I think that was May 2023. There we are saying there is business risk is that the chances that an organization is likely to fail to achieve its intended objectives. For instance, loss of a key customer. If I've said loss of a key customer, is it directly linked to that any figure in the financial statements is misstated? Not at all. Lots of key staff. Some of you, like Bida, who's asking this, you might be a key staff in your organization. And if you're a critical resource, you pose a business risk that the moment you leave, somehow, somewhere, amongst of the targets that are thought they are going to achieve, or the clients are likely to be dissatisfied because Bida, you've left a what? An organization. And the moment the customers are dissatisfied, then to some extent, the targets they had set, they failed to achieve them. Failure to achieve the targets has nothing to do with misstatements, the financial statements. So it means that when you're also defining business risks and you're explaining them, the minimum requirements is link it to the objective that is likely to be failed because of that specific risk. So the underlying factor of the minimum requirement goes back to understanding the concept, and then you explain within that line. But trust me, if you read the examiner's remarks, he's always complaining, saying students have not directly explained the concept, or they have not now associated the concept. If it's a case study question, like the insight I was giving, a business risk, don't now pick it from your mind. Like right now, you've listened to me and I've said loss of the key customer, and I've given you a case study question, and immediately, because you listened to the webinar that Nicholas facilitated and mentioned one of the business risks as a loss of key customer, and then you put it there and you start explaining. And there's nothing in the case study. That's a minimum requirement, that focus on the case study. First, pick the points that are in the case study, because we want as many points as possible. Then it's okay. You can now add other points, because you never know, from the question perspective, other points may be relevant. But at minimum, reference to the case study. That's what I can say for you, Billy. Yes, same thing he said. What are the characteristics of a good audit procedure in an exam environment? A good characteristic of an audit procedure is the one that states an objective. That's now, when you say an audit procedure, that's more of a substantive audit procedure. And when I say an audit objective, in simple terms, it's an assertion. What do I mean in details? An assertion, remember, completeness, existence, rights and obligation, occurrence, presentation and disclosure. So as you explain your procedure, do you want to confirm completeness of the transaction? Do you want to confirm the accuracy of the transaction? If they are assets, are you looking at its value? Are you looking at being owned by an entity, by the organization you're auditing? Are you looking at how it has been presented in the financial statements or disclosed? Are you looking at whether actually... So that's a characteristic of an audit procedure. You must focus on the assertion that you're auditing. And if you also check the examiner's remarks, and one of the tips I indicated, or pitfalls, failure to link procedures to assertions, management assertions. Mark Kasenge, you're saying, for the new areas that are introduced in the syllabus and are not in the old ICPA study kit, where can we find the content? Read. I think I would apologize on behalf of the Institute. There was a delay in the issuance of paper 16 kit, but I'm pretty sure it's already should already be out. I think because I had some insights. The moderator can also give more insights. So you shouldn't be worried. I can't give you any other source, but the source should be picked from the study kit that is either already out, I'm not sure, but it should be out in soon. That's what I can say. Jacqueline, you're saying, is it true that if a student does not quote any standards while answering the student, the question basically won't pass the paper? Not at all. ICPA does not entertain cram work. It does not entertain the bit of just fixed mind. We only focus on, like from the aspect of analysis, evaluation, the sensitization, combining knowledge from the different understanding of your concept, and then you answer the question. So when it comes quoting of the standards, it's not mandatory. And sometimes for me, I would recommend, there are those that have dared to quote the standards, and unfortunately, they quote it wrongly, or they quote a wrong standard, they apply it wrongly. So you better avoid that, because I'm assuring you, it's not prohibited and it's not mandatory for you to quote any standard, either unless it has been asked, which I don't remember if it has ever been asked, and it may never be set in that angle. But if it be set, it can only be from just a simple perspective, in a way that everybody should be knowing. Otherwise, ICPA is trying to simplify questions and does not expect people to cram standards. Even us who are in practice, except myself, I know my things, but most of the practitioners, because it's not mandatory, you do not need to cram the standards. At the time of executing an engagement, you go to your library, pick the book, pick the reference, know what you have forgotten, and go ahead and apply. So that's why we can never also encourage students, and it can never be put there for you to cram the standards. Some other questions, somebody saying, I have two concerns. You have talked about the right reading materials, but till now the study pack is not yet ready for this paper. I've already hinted on that. It should be soon. I had insights about being in the process of being put out. So apologies for that. It should be coming anytime soon. But still, nonetheless, that should not be an excuse. I can give you assurance on the nature of the questions, and those a few of the sections that were not there in the new syllabus. I've already told you that they were in the old syllabus, and the way they examined is that you only now need to understand the practical aspect and the expectation of the learning outcomes of paper 16. And at the same time, it's expected you either attending classes, and by default, there are other reading materials as per the syllabus that references to the areas where yourself you ought to have gotten the basis for which you actually need to pass. I've already told you, so you're supposed to take advantage of model paper. Some of them, a few of the areas are included in the model paper, and therefore you ought to have used that one and understand what is needed. Then you're saying the examiner assumes that students are in real audit practice, but you realize that most students are not in practice, and if in practice, not all in the field of audit. Please advise accordingly. I think I've already hinted on that. It's true, and it's unfortunate. The examiner assumes, because it's the setup of this paper. Remember, ICPA does not only have one paper, paper 16. It has those ones for tax. So also the one in tax is also complaining. Do everybody who's doing CPA a tax or expected to do tax? Not at all. We have public sector. Do we all going to be working in government? Not at all. So from that setting, you'd appreciate the intention of the institute, that we want from one angle to ensure that we give you the best knowledge, the foundation for which that immediately after the course, if you decide to come to the practice, you should be the right material. The same way I've told you on the side of taxation, they ground you to the extent that if you finish the course like this, you're worthwhile to be a tax advisor. Even if we have institute has, of course, another CTA as for being a tax advisor or a tax specialist. But not only before you take up that one, you already have basic knowledge for you to become a tax resource in an organization. The one for public sector I've talked about, which is public finance management. Myself, I don't work in government, but I underwent that paper. So my friend, appreciate that. Is basically what I've explained, that we don't want you to finish and then you end up realize that you want to become a practitioner, and then yet you had not actually undertook this knowledge, you hadn't gotten the knowledge. That's the reason behind why you must understand it from a practical angle. Then I think lastly here.
Excuse me, CPA Nicholas.
Yes.
Time is not on our side. We have a next webinar in the next minute. Maybe kindly just comment on this one about risk assessment, and then I'll give them guidance about the examiner's reports and the kit, and then we wind up.
Okay, thank you. On the new syllabus, additions like risk assessment, we don't have them on the study kit. How do we navigate through this? Mr. Chan, the study kit you're looking at might be a different kit. Check the new or appropriate kit, you'll find that one there. Trust me, I checked, I was given insights by the moderator herself, and I had to do research. I was given the fact that the kit that the institute has actually covers everything, even beyond what is supposed to have, to ensure that the students are not disadvantaged when they have the kit. I submit. Apologies for the time that we've spent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, CPA Nicholas, for that insightful presentation. Hopefully our students have benefited a lot, and we already thank you for supporting the profession. You've been our good resource person, so always whenever we call upon you, kindly do the needful, but we are really grateful. Now, about the study kit, it will be out very soon. I think we are in print, so very soon it will be on the market. Then someone was asking, how do I get the examiner's remarks? Kindly go to your students portal where there are student resources. We have past papers, solutions, examiner's remarks, and they are there. So that is how we access them. Thank you so much for being a good audience. Kindly remind your friends about the incoming webinars. Thank you so much.